in how I talked about letting go of a desire that you would like to manifest. And she said, how do I let go of a desire if I have a vision board and I'm constantly looking at the vision board? I thought that was such a great and important question that I really wanted to share it on the podcast. And the first thing I want to do is I want to talk to you a little bit about vision boards and how I practice a vision board and how I practice visualization and letting go of something that I want to manifest. Before I start, I just want to remind you guys that everything that I talk about is simply my perspective based on the years of experience that I have of being a seeker and based on my conversations with my intuition. Everything I tell you is written in pencil, meaning that it could possibly change tomorrow. Something could happen and I could learn a new lesson and it could completely change my perspective. Number one. Number two, I'm not a really big fan of people that give rules on how to follow a spiritual path. I think that if someone tells you that in order to practice a certain spiritual ritual, whether it's using crystals or whether it's using herbs or whatever the case may be, if someone tries to give you rules, I would be very weary of that person. I really truly believe that the only person that has answers to the direction that you need to follow is your intuition. I'm going to say that over and over and over again because there is nothing that I want more than for each and every one of us to strengthen our own personal intuition and develop our own personal opinions based on our experiences. With that being said, I also love to share my experiences, and if it can help you in any way find light or clarity and it resonates with you, then it's my pleasure. And that's why I'm doing the podcast. So I just want to get that out of the way. I do have a vision board that I create every year. What I don't do, and I know that this is like contrary to what everybody says to do, is I don't look at my vision board every single day. I don't even have my vision board up anywhere to where I can see it or be reminded of the intentions I put into my vision board. Okay, that's one thing. The second thing is that I don't build my vision board based off of magazines. The reason why I don't do this is because I feel that if I am building a vision board based off of the magazines that are accessible to me in that moment, then I am limiting myself to what I have in front of me. So the way I build my vision board, and I have found this to be the most helpful, the OG vision board that I had like back in the day is I would actually search for pictures on the internet, certain things that I wanted, very specific things that I wanted, and I would print them. And then I would like cut pictures of myself out and put myself like on a jet, all of these crazy things like sitting down and talking to Oprah and just crazy stuff like that. And as technology advanced, I began to build collages on my phone. I would do the same thing, look for pictures that I wanted, screenshot them, and then just build like a little pic collage. So my vision board is on my phone. My vision board is something that is very expansive in that it's something that is probably not going to materialize itself for this year. It's desires that I have with great expansion, like I just mentioned, sitting down and talking to Oprah, I've had that on my vision board consistently for a very long time. And I don't necessarily expect this to be the year for it to materialize. I expect for every year to be developing and working towards that goal. So that's the way I look at a vision board when I build my vision board every year. It's kind of a check-in. What is my biggest and wildest dreams? It's my place where I get to get the pie in the sky, super expansive, and I don't limit myself. Then I tuck it away. I keep it in my phone. I check in on it every once in a while when I'm reminded of something that I put in my vision board. but I do not look at it every single day. And here is why. I think that sometimes when you look at a vision board every day, you can also be reminded of how you don't have that yet. So instead of focusing on it happening, it could also be making you focus on the fact that you haven't achieved it yet. Therefore, you're doing the opposite of manifesting what you want to see materialize, and you're actually manifesting the fact that you don't have it yet. Here's the other thing. Not everyone's childhood or background or limited beliefs are the same. And this is why I haven't taken a deep dive into these topics on the law of attraction, because I believe that in order to really gain spiritual strength, we need to work on blockages that are standing in our way, that are hindering us from achieving those bigger goals. Basically, in the series, the Moon Cycle series, and in the Yoni series, like I mentioned before, we're sort of starting from the ground. We're trying to clear any energies that are keeping us from actually achieving those next level goals. What we find sometimes is that when someone takes a big leap in their life and they manifest something that is grand, for example, like winning the lottery, and they come from a place of limited beliefs and poverty, yes, they have manifested the lottery, but what you find in studies is that a lot of these people actually spend all of their money. It's too much for them to handle. They go back right to where they came from. It's really hard for them to be able to build on that. And I think it's because there's so many limiting beliefs that they have that they haven't worked through. So for me, in terms of the goals and the things that I want to achieve in my life, I really want to do the groundwork so that when I reach the heights that I know I will eventually reach, my mindset, I'm spiritually, emotionally, and physically strong to be in the place where I need to be. But I do think it is important to answer these types of questions. So I do want to get you guys answers. For example, the question that Christina asked, it's referencing the last episode. And I think it's important so that you guys can start manifesting and being able to let go of intentions that you possibly have and allow for the universe to take care of it for you. A vision board, for me, from my personal perspective, is a way to deliberately create. Deliberate creation means something that you are intending to create. You're intentional about what you want to manifest and what you want to see in your life. I also think that a lot of the times vision boards can be misunderstood and misinterpreted. And it makes us believe that what is taking place in our life is sort of external, when in fact, what is taking place in our life is actually internal. It's a reflection of what is taking place inside the mind. That is why I personally favor deliberate creation in the form of meditation, because it allows me to go inside and internally adjust what I want to see take place for myself that will benefit me for the day. Instead of looking at a vision board every day that's limiting me to something that I was like shooting for the stars back in January, everything changes. So to me, it's important to try and practice deliberate creation on a daily basis. I don't do this every day. It's a practice and I try to do it every day. And sometimes I'm amazing at it and sometimes I suck at it. It's just part of my human experience. But what I do is I like to have a silent meditation where I try to empty out my thoughts. And then I have a meditation where I use my third eye and I create what I want to see happen for the day. Since I'm practicing deliberate creation on a daily basis, I don't like to see I'm not gonna, envision sitting down with Oprah for the day. I like to set the tone for the day to get me in a place where I will eventually, yes, sit down with Oprah. Things don't happen overnight. And I think sometimes when we hear about the law of attraction and learn about manifesting, we shoot for the stars, which is always great, but you have to also be somewhat realistic on how you're going to get there. So when you deliberately create on a daily basis, you're actually creating the steps to get to the end result. So that's why I practice a deliberate creation meditation, which is just me visualizing what I want to see happen. The other thing that I want to talk about, and what this episode was originally going to be about, which ties in perfectly. Thank you, Christina, for following your intuition and just asking me this question, because it ties in so perfectly. I wanted to talk to you about writing to your intuition. We have 5 more days left in Mercury in retrograde. And instead of being super excited for April 15th, let's try to really hone in on the power that these next 4 or 5 days has. If you're listening to this after Mercury in retrograde, this is still a very important tool to have in your arsenal. So don't get discouraged because you might be listening to this after April 15th. Make use of these next couple of days, and I would like to suggest that you write to your intuition. Writing to my intuition is something that I love doing. I write to my intuition when I find myself in a difficult place and I need answers. I don't really resort to it as often as I should be. I should be writing to my intuition more often, but I don't. And I always find myself writing to my intuition when I'm more in a place of needing clarity and wanting answers. I don't think there's a wrong or right way to do it. I have a special notebook that I use for when I write to my intuition. It's just like a 5-star notebook from when you go to school. And I like it because there's a lot of space and I could really write. And then I can also go back and look at past letters that I've written. I wrote to my intuition when I was facing the limited beliefs that surfaced for me during the incident with the computer. And I went back to look at old letters that I had written, and I found a letter in there that I had written exactly a year ago from the day that I was writing this next letter, which was crazy. If you remember in last week's episode, I mentioned that last year I was entering a really dark space, and I want to clarify on what a dark space means to me. A dark space for me means a time where I have to go inward and begin to strategize, analyze with myself and my higher self. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm completely submerged in a negative space. It just means I turn the lights off. I am in the dark because I'm choosing to be in the dark, and I'm honing in on this power that the darkness gives me when I seclude myself, when I go inside, when I rework my thoughts. It helps me to do that every once in a while. And this was one of those times. And what reemerged was beautiful. So I don't want you to take me saying I was in a very dark space as I was completely depressed or sad. It's not actually anything like that. It's just more of a transition. I need a break. I need to turn the lights off and I need to lie down for a little bit. That's kind of like the way I look at it. So I wrote to my intuition a year ago, and originally this whole episode was going to be just about writing to your intuition. I uploaded an episode about writing to my intuition to another podcast that I used to host. What I've done is I've extracted that episode, and I'm going to share it here in this episode so you can listen. But it ties in what Christina was asking in terms of manifesting and addressing the way I like to manifest, which is deliberate creation and then letting go and allowing for the universe to cook up the order I just placed and trusting that the universe is going to do that at the right time and if it serves me. If it does not serve me, no matter how bad I want it, don't give it to me. I once heard someone explain that God doesn't give us what does not serve us and what's not for us, in the same way that we as dog owners don't give our dogs chocolate. No matter how bad they want the chocolate, you can't give your dog chocolate because chocolate kills your dog. So in that same way, God is perfect and knows what is for you and what isn't for you. Letting it go, to me, is having the experience in my head, and if it comes into fruition, and if I get to live it, great. And if I don't, it's okay because I experienced it in my head and I know that God is in charge and God is making the perfect pathway for me. And that what I didn't get, it's probably because I'm going to get something 20 times better. And it always works out that way. Before I share this next episode, I do want to say that just hang in there. It might sound a little confusing. You might have to listen to it a couple of times. It kind of goes into the deep end, talking about like law of attraction and stuff like that, and a spiritual journey. And we haven't gone into conversations like this on Let There Be Lose. They're coming and they're happening today. They're happening right now. And they're going to, I have a feeling that we're definitely moving in this direction fast and furiously. I do want to mention that I talk about the ego in that episode, and I don't think that I've talked about the ego a lot on Let There Be Lose. I'm pretty sure I haven't. So I'm going to share with you my interpretation of the ego, which is Eckhart Tolle's interpretation of the ego. And this is going to be like the Cliff Notes version. If you are constantly thinking about the past, then you are being controlled by your ego. For me, the ego is a representation of the devil, for me personally. If you're thinking about the past, you're in constant pain. And if you're thinking about the future, you're still being ruled by the ego and you're in constant worry. So the idea is to live not in the past, not in the future, but directly in the present. And in the present moment, that is when you can connect to your higher self. That's when you can connect to God. That is when magic happens, is in the present moment. It doesn't happen in the future, and it doesn't happen in the past. When we are constantly thinking about the past and the future, that is a sickness that we have. And our spiritual journey is really simple. It's to overcome that sickness and to be present in this moment because it is all that we have. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're just going to jump right into the episode on writing to my intuition. And I had a very confusing question that I needed my intuition to answer for me about being in the present moment, but also trying to focus on a future manifestation that pulled me away from being in the present moment.
Return to the one. To the one. Return to the one.
I am going to ask my intuition, how is it that I explain envisioning your future while still staying present in this moment? I found it really interesting that as I began to question my intuition sort of reversed the roles and began asking me questions. So here we go. Let's just get started. My first question was, I have something I need your clarity on. I'm seeking your help. Can you help me? And my intuition responded, we are here. The fact that my intuition said we, I thought was really interesting because I've written to my intuition before, but I've never heard my intuition refer to itself as we. I speak to it constantly and I don't ever recall it referring to itself as we. But I do have to say that when my intuition said we are here, I really felt like I was in a safe space and there was an army of spiritual guides that I had access to. So that was really comforting and interesting and something that I wanted to call out. My next question is, are they going to think that I'm weird because... And immediately I couldn't even finish the question and my intuition interrupted and said, most likely. The rest of the question was because we communicate. So are they going to think I'm weird because we communicate? My intuition's answer immediately was most likely. And then my intuition followed it with this. You can't tell them to not care what others think and follow their hearts if you are not doing the same. Be true to who you are freely. Be the example of what you are teaching. And so I thought that was pretty interesting because right away my intuition put me in my place. I was a little afraid, or I guess not afraid, but apprehensive to just come out and be like, I have an intuition and it talks to me and it tells me things, because I know how weird that must sound. I feel like most likely there are more of you that can relate to me than those that cannot. And if you can't relate to me, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I fell in love with the idea that my intuition was sort of giving me some type of permission to be bold in my experience and what I practice and what I feel, my internal thoughts. And then after I felt that immense sense of gratitude, I heard my intuition say, the student is the most powerful teacher, not the teacher itself. For where is learning without examples? I had to process that, so I'm going to read it again. The student is the most powerful teacher, not the teacher itself. For where is learning without examples? And that is so true. How can we learn without an example? I was in my bedroom doing this, and my fiance Alfonso was with the baby in the living room, and he knew I was about to do this, so I needed like extra special quiet time. He yells out, "Babe, do you know where the baby's cup is?" And I was so ticked off because I was like, he knows I'm in here and I'm writing to my intuition and, how dare he interrupt me? I started to get lost with the ego and lost in my emotion. For all I know, the baby really needed his cup at that moment and it was easier just to ask me. I don't know what the situation was, but I was so caught up by the ego. I began to worry because I thought, what if I lost my intuition? What if I can't tap back into my intuition where I left off? And as all of these thoughts started going through my head, I heard my intuition say, move on, Linda. You're stuck in the past. My intuition was able to talk to me and take me away from the ego. I've never noticed that before. That doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. It just means that I've never noticed that my intuition has pulled me away from the ego. I don't know, maybe I just kind of had this notion that I can't hear my intuition unless I'm in the present moment, maybe that's what I thought. So to hear my intuition come in and pull me out of that was really eye-opening to me. And it also made me really excited at the thought that all of us have this added tool that's accessible to us and to help bring us into the now. In other words, we don't have to just be dependent on, okay, I feel a dark emotion, let's get back into the now. Okay, I feel anxiety, let's get back into the now. You have another tool, and that's your intuition. We just have to learn to listen to it. Immediately after that discovery, I get right back into it, and I ask my intuition, during the practice of deliberate creation, if I am to imagine the future in order to create or manifest the life that I want to live, then can you explain how that's not contradicting the practice of staying in the present moment? So This is the question that I'm after, the question that I'm wanting to be answered. Explain it to me, because I can't explain it in my head, but I know that there is an answer that exists. I know there is. So my intuition responds, meditate. So I practice 2 types of meditations, the deliberate creation and quieting of the mind. So I asked my intuition, which one of these do I do? And my intuition responds, both. So I always quiet the mind first, and then I deliberately create when I meditate. I don't think there's a wrong or a right way to do it. I just think that this is what works best for me, because when I begin to deliberately create, I'm coming from a place that is non-egotistical, since I've already quieted the mind. So I went ahead and meditated for the full 10 minutes, like I mentioned, 5 minutes of quieting the mind and 5 minutes of deliberately creating. When I finished, my intuition began to question me. I don't believe that's ever happened before. I think this is the first time that actually, I am almost positive that this is the first time, which I thought was really weird. Or it wasn't weird, but it was a new experience. My intuition asks, "What did you see?" I saw 2 owls. I got the sense that they were a perfect balance of each other, like the yin and the yang. Before we go any deeper into this, I just want to address this really quick, because I know that in our community, the owls are sometimes tied to something negative and something evil. They are usually referred to as witches. And I just wanted to say that in my vision, when I saw the owls, I didn't see them as anything negative. I saw them as 2 very wise beings, like almost like their energy was giving me some sort of knowledge. And funny enough, that's why I think our community has so much fear surrounding the owls, because as humans, we tend to fear what we really don't understand. So the next question from my intuition was, "What did you feel?" I felt I was a receiver of source. I could feel the light pouring in. My intuition asks, "What did you notice?" I noticed that my hands were open and facing up, almost as a confirmation of sorts, that I was on the receiving end of source. Also confirming to me that source lives in the now. And even though I already know these things, I like to pay attention when I keep getting confirmations of what I already know. I think that, at least for me, learning is very repetitive. So the more and more I practice something and the more and more something is confirmed, it sort of helps me move on with my lesson and grow. So the next set of questions pertain to the meditation where I was deliberately creating. My intuition asks, "What did you see?" Myself. So I thought that was very interesting, as opposed to seeing the 2 owls in the first practice, that all I saw in the second practice of deliberately creating was myself. What did you feel? I felt source flowing out of me. The energy was more forceful and with intent. What did you notice? My hands turned face down, almost as if they were confirming that I was no longer the receiver, but I was now the giver. Who were you giving to? The self. I was giving to me. And when I wrote that, and when I felt that, I felt really selfish. But then, after I felt that feeling, my intuition said to me, "For when you don't give to yourself, you cannot give to others." And then that really made me think. It triggered almost a flow of answers to me, and I began writing to my intuition again, then asking my intuition questions. So my conclusion to all of the questions that my intuition just asked was as follows. So deliberate creating the future is like a balance, the direct balance to the practice of quieting the mind, like the 2 owls I saw, the yin and the yang. My intuition responds, yes. You came here to deliberately create, and you also came here to deliberately receive. Give and receive. That sounds like, duh, of course, give and receive. We're taught that our whole lives, give and you shall receive. But I really still had to stop and process it because now it was in the form of the way I was meditating every morning, that quieting the mind was receiving and deliberately creating was the giving. So then I go on and I tell my intuition. The idea is to be deliberate with our thoughts when we are envisioning the future. That's what keeps us present. And my intuition responded exactly. So then I go on to respond, so it's like when you are cooking a meal. We are present in that moment while we're cooking that meal. We are in the now when we're cooking. But the ultimate result of cooking a meal is for something that will take place in the future. It's not for that present moment. You are cooking so that in 30 minutes or an hour from the point where you start cooking, you will eat the meal. And that is what deliberate creation is. That was like, whoa, that to me was mind-blowing, but it doesn't stop there. Because then I go on to be like, okay, so when we aren't deliberately creating, it is most likely the ego. And my intuition interrupted me and said, no, it's not most likely. It is the ego creating. And then I went on. And the ego is creating something we don't want to create. It may look like something we want because it's coming from within us, but it's coming from the place of the ego. It turns out to be something that is not truly aligned with who we are. And then the intuition said yes. And then it said, be careful what you wish for. That is where that saying comes from. You have to be careful what your ego is creating for you. I mean, I have to stop and process all of this and really just think about it. That was it. That was my conversation with my intuition. That was Linda a year ago. It's so weird for me to listen to myself a year ago because so many things have happened since I recorded that episode and so many things have changed. If you want to listen to the full episode that has a lot more information, I'm going to link that episode in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. If you guys have any questions on writing to your intuition, then please leave those questions in the last picture that we posted on our Instagram at Let There Be Luz. And if you want to hear more episodes like this, let us know as well on the last picture on our Instagram. What I want to challenge you with this week for Mercury in retrograde homework is write a letter to your intuition and just cultivate that relationship. See what comes to you. What do you hear? Keep practicing if you don't necessarily hear something. And that voice will get stronger. The more you seek it, the stronger it will get. When it comes to practicing spirituality, you really have to put in the work so that you can have these experiences for yourselves. That is what's going to make you a stronger seeker as your journey continues. Thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode. I love you guys. Please be sure to follow us on Instagram. And thank you so much to everyone that purchased healings for the month of April. We have sold out. I really appreciate you all. We will have more healings coming up in the month of May, of course. I also wanted to let you guys know that I am taking on a healing that is going to be a donated healing where nothing is asked for in exchange. I will let you guys know when that healing will open up. I have taken someone on since last month who is going through a really challenging time, and I have dedicated, I believe, the next 4 or 5 months to her because that is what I'm being called to give. So we will give you all information in a future date once I'm done with her on how you could apply to have healings done on a donated basis. This is for people that find themselves in need, that don't have the monetary funds to get a healing, that really genuinely do not have the monetary funds. Thank you so much for listening. Head over to iTunes. Be sure to give us a 5-star rating. Remember that when you rate us, you're also voting for other podcasts of color. You're voting for other spiritual podcasts. You're voting for other podcasts that are hosted by women. Remember to go over there and not only rate, but also write a review. I also want to give a very special thank you to Carlos Ponce and Jessica Resendiz for my dope ass microphone. They upgraded me and they got me a nice fly, super dope microphone. So special thank you. I love you guys. I appreciate it. Such a beautiful gesture. Thank you. May your light within get stronger.
Return to the one.